right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You want to stop shop for all things Commanders. Today we got Ryan Fowler from back from Indianapolis. Ryan, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, Doug. Always appreciate you having me on, man.
Oh man, always enjoy having you on. For those watching, and we're expecting to see it on Twitter. Apparently, the live stream for StreamYard is having problems, so we'll get the video up on Twitter when we're done. But if you're watching on YouTube, then we're live. Make sure you jump in the comments and tell us what you think. Uh, Ryan, how many prospects are you through at this point? How many are you studying in a cycle?
A lot. There's a lot, Doug. It feels like in this class, especially, you head in each year. There's usually you start with guys like 350, usually, but probably upwards of about probably more than 400, probably upwards of 450. At this point, again, I feel like every single day there's someone that pops up, whether it's a small school guy or a guy that deserves more attention, or one of these guys that showcase themselves well at one of these pre-draft events. It's a lot of guys. It's a lot of guys.
I'm curious when you were out there in Indy, what the talk is, with college football going so late now with the playoffs, and they've moved the combine up a little bit. It feels like more and more we're going to see guys that are in programs that make the playoffs that are just not going to do all the things, maybe can't do all the things at the combine. Do you think we're going to get to a point in the next couple of years where they've got to really shift the focus on what it is we're trying to accomplish at the combine?
Yeah, 1,000%, 1,000%. I wish, Doug, we could head into each combine like it was even as soon as 10 years ago and say these are the top prospects and they're going to do everything. Agents get involved, trainers get involved, schools get involved. We didn't see Travis Hunter or Mason Graham or Abdul Carter. We didn't see Shadur or Cam Throw. We didn't see any of those guys. And there were opportunities, of course, for all those guys to do even pre-draft events like a Shrine or a Senior Bowl or whatever, but we just haven't seen those players. So it does correlate a little bit, with how long the CFP goes and in general just the college football campaign goes. But even look at the Senior Bowl for guys like Riley Leonard from Notre Dame that went down there and still competed. I don't want to sit here and say those guys simply don't want to compete, because obviously there's a lot of money involved with what's going on there. But it definitely plays a part in it, and it's definitely different times. I feel like with everything, away from the transfer portal, away from NIL, that's another part of this college to NFL transition that it's a lot of questions still to be answered, and hopefully this combine doesn't fade out as far as just an event that's really overlooked nowadays.
Our buddy EJ Snyder had posted a picture of the new pellets. I'm curious if that was a thing that made the rounds there, because I had heard it from a couple of different people that they were worried that whatever the new pellet system is for the artificial turf would affect times. I guess it doesn't matter if everybody's running on the same surface, but again, how much do we put in these, knowing the variance from year to year on
Yeah.
things like that?
Yeah, I'll say this. It wasn't fun seeing guys like Will Campbell almost look like he's going to tear his ACL in on-field drills. It seemed like even the first group right for on-field drills was the edge guys and linebackers and the big boys up front, and everybody was slipping everywhere. It was just like it was guy after guy after guy. And something that popped in my mind yesterday watching the O-linemen get after it was one of their pull drills, and they're getting 10 yards downfield, and the coach is telling them here or here to redirect. And he's waiting until about 2 yards to tell those guys at 6'6", 330 plus pounds to then change direction. What are we doing? What are we doing? So I know the surfaces and stuff like that come into it. I don't know what was going on there at Lucas Oil all week long, but it was definitely something different than years prior.
Do you think they've been talking for years about moving it? Do you think that will happen?
As of right now, no. I know the NFL loves it because everything is centralized, right? You have Lucas Oil, you have the convention center. You don't even have to go outside to get from place to place down there. Even for the hotels, you can go to the Marriott, you can go to the Westin. Everything's right there. I don't think it moves as of right now, but I think in the future, maybe if they want to make it a little bit more marketable to go to a Vegas or an Orlando, a Miami, or an LA, maybe that's something down the road. But right now, I don't see that.
Because it's a nice setup, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's free for people to come in. The tickets are
Yeah.
free to come in and watch. And I mean, they're doing. I mean, obviously, they do all they can with all of these things to make it fan friendly and enjoyable. So I think that's interesting. Who were some of the guys that you were looking at when you were in Indianapolis?
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing heading into Indy, whatever guys did, 40s, verts, broads, I can't move a guy up 50, 60 spots like you see from some others, around the industry, for just watching guys in Indianapolis. Now, I will say this as far as running back with Amarian Hampton and Ashton Genty not doing anything, or safety with what Nick Amenwari did comparatively to Malachi Starks, or at receiver to what Matthew Golden did and what we saw from Luther Burden or Tator McMillan, who did not run. And I don't know if he will run, Doug, in this pre-draft process. So those three specific positions where I could see right now, I know some teams have Amarian Hampton over Ashton Genty as their RB1. And it was really good for me personally to see Amarian show up the way he looked. He looks like Saquon Barkley. The dude is
Oh,
just
wow.
up out of his mind. Really good young man. And then you turn on the tape as well at North Carolina. He's just a sensational type of football player and had a hell of a week from a testing perspective. So that stuff, you check the boxes. But for me, Doug, I think the bottom line, what I'm trying to get to here is learning who the players are between the ears for me is the biggest thing. I can watch as much tape as I want, but what type of leader are you going to be? Are you a guy that's just here to steal a paycheck? Or am I a GM that's going to draft you and try to get you here on a second contract, as we move in here 4 or 5 years down the road? So those are the biggest things, getting to know these players as much as they are away from just their tape over the last few years.
And that's the biggest thing, right, for a GM. I mean, most of these guys understand what a good football player looks like.
Yeah,
The difference between the talent level, I think, probably gets smaller every year as everybody's,
agree.
particularly with NIL money, right? Like everybody can afford to get outside training. So I think that shrinks some. It's about being able to discern who's out there on the field as a teammate, who's out there because they want to, and not just because they're good at playing the sport of football, has to be challenging.
Yeah, and I think a thing about it too is, it may sound a little juvenile here as far as just saying, I like that guy because he looks like a leader or he's a rah guy. It's more than that. When they're in a GM, you're Adam Peters, for example, and you're sitting there trying to parallel prospects, and there's similar skill sets. They've had similar production. Maybe they're both power four guys. You're going to take the guy that you've enjoyed more in meetings and saying, I can look at this guy and say he's going to work on his craft, and this guy maybe a little bit less than that. So those things matter as far as who these young men are behind the scenes, behind the face mask, because when they come into a city, sure, they're part of your football team and that's their job, but they're going to be around the community. And DC, there's a lot of stuff to do, as you know, Doug, up and down the DMV area. So those things absolutely matter when they're trying to whittle down their boards here, really in a board overall in a class where there's so many names where they can go in all different types of rounds, which makes it, at the end of the day, a lot of fun too.
The Commanders are at 29, and Adam Peters has done something I didn't really think that he would do, and that is they've traded away a lot of draft picks.
Mhm.
For a guy that likes drafting players, they won't have very many. How First of all, do you think they'll have pick 29 by the time we get there? And how important do you think it is for Adam to be able to trade out of that spot and pick up more pieces? Or is there some guys at 29 that you say, you know what, I'll just sit at 29 and enjoy getting a really good player?
Yeah, Doug, that's a great question. Right now, I don't think they stay at 29. I do think they trade back. I do think they grab some more assets, considering where they are in this class as far as they need edge. They could add another IDL. If they want to move back, maybe is it 29 to 32 or 33, like we saw with the Chiefs and Bills last year
Mhm.
with the Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy stuff, or do they go back a little further? I think they're going to be in a good spot if they move back and maybe add or third or fourth. Maybe they get a 4 or 5 for trading John Allen. We'll see what happens there. But also, if they stay at 29, I think their focus is going to be at the edge spot. I really do. And I think if there's one guy that would pop to my mind, I would love for him to be there. That's Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. 2023, the tape was outstanding. I wanted to see him take that next step this fall, and he absolutely did. Put on that pit tape, 15 pressures, 4 sacks. The guy was unstoppable all year long. It was tight ends. It was doubling with guards and tackles. It was all running backs chipping them and working out in the flats. He's just a guy that continued to succeed, and he goes to the combine, and the testing as far as short shuttle, 3-cone. I know Adam Peters really values that in his process. The guy can change direction on a blink of an eye, and he's also a really, really good young man that's going to come in and work his backside off for you. So at 29, if I stay there and I'm Adam Peters, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College is probably near the top of my list.
And he's one of those super benders, right? Like
Yes.
real bendy.
Right.
Not all guys hit the edge like that. Uh, Jihad Campbell is a name I've seen mentioned with the Commanders. He had an incredible combine. I'm sure people are now going back to the tape to see, is he off ball linebacker? Is he an edge? What do we do with him? What would you do with him? And is there any chance he's there at 29 at this point?
If he's there at 29, Doug, praise the Lord. If he's there at 29, you sprint that card up if you're Adam Peters. But no, I fully expect him to be a top 20, top 21 player in this class. It's a good problem to have for Jihad. You can play the edge. You can play middle linebacker if you want to. You can even do some stuff that Micah Parsons does as far as standing over the A and B gaps. But then again, it'd be a great fit considering what Joe Witt did with Frankie Louvu this year. I think they're very similar skill sets, but Jihad has a little bit more dynamic, explosive, athletic profile than what Frankie has. And obviously, Frankie had a heck of a year here in Washington. But Jihad, if he's there at 29, run the card up, but I don't think he's going to be there. And I'd make a good bet that he isn't.
Speaking of linebackers, if Bobby Wagner wanted to come back, would you bring him back? And how excited do you think that the Commanders are to get McGee back on the field, who was looking pretty good last year before he got hurt? And I know as well as you do, they were excited about that draft pick.
I'm so glad, Doug, that you brought up that name because I think Jordan McGee continues to fall behind the curtain. Nobody's talking about Jordan McGee at all. If Bobby Wagner comes back, great. If he doesn't, then they're obviously expecting Jordan to take a step. I remember late last year in April, moving into day 3, I put out a tweet that morning and said, keep an eye out for a young man out of Temple, linebacker Jordan McGee for the Commanders. And didn't know he would end up in Washington. Not going to say that. Not going to pat my back here too much. But he's just a dynamic playmaker at the second level. Was damn near top of the country in TFL. Is just a dynamic downhill defender. I think he is someone that's absolutely going to take a step in year 2. And again, a lot of people aren't talking about Jordan. So if you come back into this year with Bobby and Frankie again as your 2 in the middle, I'm fine with that. And you integrate Jordan even more for 2026. But if Bobby departs and Jordan comes into, I'm not saying play 99% of the snaps like Bobby did basically all year, but come in potentially 50 to 60% of the snaps as that rotational hybrid piece, I'm pumped up to see Jordan McGee because he flat out is a tone setter in the middle of that defense. And we know what Frankie Louvu provides as far as pop and physicality as well.
And McGee's one of those sideline to sideline guys that we've kind of missed here for a while. I mean, Bobby was great last year, don't get me wrong, but he's obviously not the Bobby he was even, say, 4 years ago, speed-wise. Jordan's got that burst to get from sideline to sideline. I'm excited to see kind of what he's able to do. It sounds, Ryan, like Jonathan Allen not back. Is that, from a fan perspective, I think that has more to do with we're over the Alabama experience, right? Like the experiment didn't work. Time to move on, try something different. They can't really get rid of Payne's contract.
Right.
If they don't want to keep both, then Allen's got to go. In your mind, in my mind, I'll rephrase. In my mind, I think they'd probably rather keep Jonathan Allen, trade Deron Payne, just not able to do it with the contracts. How needy are they on the interior of that defensive line if, say, John Allen goes?
Yeah, look, it's a great class to need a guy. And I think if John goes, I think if you're whether you get him for a 4th or a 5th, and let's just say someone takes on the money he's supposed to make this year, I think the positive of that, Doug, is that you're probably working towards a net neutral with the Deebo Samuel stuff as far as what you're going to pay him. And you're basically saying, just face value, we got Deebo Samuel for a 5th, which really excites me personally. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there, but we'll see what they're saying as far as we get to next December and January with that situation. Really excited for that. But when you look along this interior group, let's just say John departs and you're going in with Deron and Johnny, which is what we saw most of 2024 as your top 2 guys. There's a lot of players on day 3 in this class. CJ West from Indiana, Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech, Jamari Caldwell's a favorite of mine from Oregon, Ty Robinson from Nebraska is that Adam Carricker vibe type of player from the same school. So those players, those 4 or 5 names right there, those guys are going to be probably valued late day 2, early day 3. But where the Commanders are, if they add a fourth or a fifth, most likely a fourth for John Allen, there's a situation where you could add a guy to be a rotational piece for you as a rookie. And all of those names, I'd be plenty comfortable adding there late day 2, early portions of day 3.
A guy that I've been talking about a lot. In fact, I have changed my Twitter account to Emanwari Stan account. Okay. I can't imagine now. I think people thought I was crazy a week and a half ago when I said I'm running the card at 29 if Nick Emanwari is there. I think now, like, the card's getting run somewhere in the early teens, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that dude can play. He can get you free. The man lined up at boundary corner at one point, right?
He did. He did. And look, in that South Carolina defense, I could sit here naming names and arguably the best guy, and I know you know this name, Dylan Stewart, who was the true freshman, is probably going to be a top 3 pick when he comes out in a couple of years. But Nick, everyone's talking about him and Malachi Starks. First off, Nick, I fully expect him to be off the board first off than Malachi. I think Malachi is a hell of a player, but when you're 2 inches taller than Malachi, you're 25 pounds heavier, and you basically run a faster 40 and 2/10 faster than him. The tape is really good. He's also an SEC guy. That's where you try to parallel these guys and say, well, do I want this guy or do I want this guy? And scouts, bottom line, Doug, are always going to take the bigger, faster player. That's just how it is. So Nick, bottom line, locked himself in to be most likely a top 20 player in this class.
When you watch the tape back on Malachi Starks this year, what did you see? Because it wasn't the same guy that I was used to seeing the previous couple years at Georgia. I know they didn't move him quite as much, but I was curious what you thought, and does it warrant the drop that he's going to seemingly take in the draft?
No, I really do like Malachi Starks, and you probably remember this too, Doug. I know you're a Georgia guy, right?
Big dog.
You're a Georgia guy, yeah. So even watching him back at high school as a triple option quarterback was
Mhm.
really fun to watch. But Malachi, for me, is still a first-round player in this class. I think with teams wanting to throw it 35, 40 times a game, you need that center field type of safety to roam number to number, and you always know what you're going to get from Georgia defenders as far as triggering downhill. And I think Malachi can improve a little bit in his game in that facet, but I think overall he does not warrant the drop that he's had really the last few weeks. What we've seen in him, even in Indy, to where, of course, he didn't impress as far as what Nick did from a testing perspective. But I really didn't see a player specifically in the DB group that looked as smooth and fluid as Malachi did in space. And that's really what impressed me the most on tape. And again, as I said earlier, Doug, I'm not going to look at a guy because he ran maybe a tenth or two slower than what I expected, and I'm going to drop him 30 spots. So Malachi, again, is still a first-round player. He may drop back to maybe the late 20s, 30s. If he's there at 29, I'm absolutely comfortable Washington grabbing him. If he slips past Washington, he probably goes right behind him to Buffalo at 30.
Yeah. The quarterback situation for Commanders is interesting. Sanders still had a nice season outside.
Mhm.
I know that it seems like they would prefer him inside. I say this, I've said this on the podcast a couple of times. People keep saying, "Oh, the Eagles got Cooper DeJean," and well, so did we, right? If he was in the nickel that whole time, you'd see the same thing. He has to play boundaries. Only played corner for a couple of years. If you're Adam Peters, are you excited that you stole one with a boundary corner and you want to keep seeing what it is? Or is a boundary corner like a Revel from ECU or the kid from Kentucky? Is that an option at 29 so that you can get Mikey back inside?
I'll say this: I would prioritize Sanders still over both those guys on the outside right now if I was Adam Peters. And I
Really?
think as of right now, Mike is the best corner on the roster for Washington.
Mhm.
I can't sit here and say Marshawn Lattimore is, considering what we saw. Now, I think Marshawn was hurt all of last year. I really do. Hopefully, he works up to being a top 3 corner in the whole entire NFC. I think that's what the goal was for Adam Peters, to bring him into town. But right now, Mike Sanders still CB1 on this roster, and usually your top corner isn't at nickel. The Lions could probably say that with Brian Branch, but Mikey playing on the outside. You mentioned Cooper DeJean. Cooper, we'll see what happens now with Darius Slay now gone out of Philadelphia. If they ask Cooper to play on the outside, he is not a perimeter corner. I don't think Philly fans realize that, to where it was really nice when they rushed 4 and they dropped 7 and he was in nickel, keeping everything in front of him. And I'm not taking anything away from Cooper DeJean, but Mike Sanders still bounced to the outside. Cooper on the outside, asking him to play man against some of these number one receivers. We'll see how that works out for him. So again, no flack to Cooper DeJean, had a hell of a year, but there's situations from nickel to the outside. Cooper was not asked to do that. Mikey was, and I would not be shocked from Washington's perspective, really in that late day 2, day 3 bucket, Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, those types of guys to keep an eye out for as you move forward deeper into the process.
If you're leaving Mikey outside, do you entertain then bringing Igbenogany back in the slot? Because he was really good last year.
He was, and I like the versatility, but I really do like this nickel class. I do, and that's the reason why I really like Mikey on the outside right now. Now, I'm not trying to have every corner of mine 5'9", 5'10", but Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, Jabbar Muhammad from Oregon, Elijah Huzzy, North Carolina, Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers, those types of guys are going to be guys on the outside, move inside. Even a Mac McWilliams, I talked about him on other shows, Doug, from UCF. Really good tape against Travis Hunter, Tator McMillan, Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, first rounder next year. Whether he plays inside or outside, that's a guy, again, later in the process to where you could add potentially to play if Noah departs and they keep Mike on the outside.
We had, I think it was Eric Edholm was on with us the other day and was talking about watching Donovan Jackson from Ohio State and said it was amazing because, everybody thought he was going to be one of the better guards in the class. And then when you watched him fill in for Simmons when he got hurt, it was like, oh, wow, maybe he was even more explosive. Like maybe he's even allowed to be better outside. I guess this is a long way to getting to what we've got in Washington. Again, does Adam Peters get excited that he hit a 3rd round pick at left tackle, or are you looking to upgrade the position and get him inside the guard?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to go 2 years in a row of having a rookie protect Jaden Daniels' blind side. I think maybe right now, if I had to guess as far as what this offensive line would look like, I would rather have a rookie at right guard. Keep Brandon out at left tackle. We'll see what happens at right tackle with Andrew Wiley. I like Biotish. I like Allegretti. They fit exactly the body types that Kingsbury wants in the ground game. I would like to see a little bit more athleticism at certain spots. I like Brandon. I like Cosme, but I think there's a little bit more athleticism needed. I look at a guy that's versatile, center guard, Jake Majors from Texas, Drew Kendall from Boston College on day 3. Really impressed with his movement skills. So those are just a couple guys that they want to add some more, just some footwork, some zip, some pop along the position. I think a couple of those guys could come in and play right guard right away.
You mentioned Deebo Samuels. There are currently 3 receivers on the roster.
Yep.
They've got to add some. How do they fix it? And before how do they fix it, I'm just curious your thoughts on the Deebo move. I mean, I kind of got a glimpse of it earlier. I'm with you for a 5th round pick. It's stealing. Maybe he was heavy last year. Maybe he was tired of being out there.
Yeah.
Not sure. But at 29, this notion that he's already hit and lost his prime. Now, if you want to argue that he's not a true X or Z receiver, and that's what he wants to be, that's a totally different story. But I'm assuming that Peters isn't bringing a guy that doesn't want to do what made him great. So assuming he's going to do all those things, it feels like great value.
1,000%. You're not going to get a guy in this class in the 5th round that's even comparable to what you're going to get from Deebo Samuel. And again, he just turned 29 years old. The guy in San Francisco is battling for targets from arguably the top tight end in football. In my opinion, the top running back in football when he's healthy in Christian McCaffrey, one of the most versatile players ever to do it. Brandon Ayuk is arguably a top 20 receiver in football. They drafted Ricky Pearsall, who came on the back end of the year after what he dealt with in the early portions of his career. There's only one football to go around. And I would take Jaden Daniels over Brock Purdy every single day of the week. And also, horizontal raid, what Kingsbury wants to do. He fits it perfectly. And wide receiver 2 was in need in Washington. And they needed more pop in the running back room. He can do everything for you. And I don't think he needs to be an X. I don't think he needs to be a Z. You hear some Eagles people talk about, well, he's not A.J. Brown. Well, you don't need him to be A.J. Brown. We have Terry McLaurin here as the bona fide wide receiver 1. And considering how Jaden elevated not just Terry with the 13 touchdowns this year, everybody else within the receiver core for guys like Olamide Zaccheaus, who, by the way, Jalen Hurts would never elevated in Philadelphia, and Jamison Crowder, those types of players and a Zach Ertz that people said were over the hill, I'm sure as hell certain that he can elevate a guy like Deebo Samuel. And good luck to defenses that when they want to live in too high and counter the speed of Terry. Now you got to protect the ground game, and now you got to protect the intermediate area and have to tackle Deebo Samuel in space. I can't wait. And he's well, there's a lot of doubters out there right now, Doug, beyond the Washington walls. And I've tried to share my thoughts with people, and I'm just going to be quiet for now. I really am, but this is going to be a perfect fit considering how Jaden has elevated everybody around him, and considering who Brock Purdy is, who Jaden Daniels is, completely different beast.
And not just that, but because of the way defenses have to play Jaden Daniels, I mean, Debo's might be one of the best zone beaters in the
100%.
league. And teams don't want to get into man because then Jaden's just going to take off on you. The idea that he wasn't the perfect fit for what they're trying to do here, low risk, high reward type situation to me. Again, they've only got 3. I thought Diami did enough at the end of the season to really make me feel like, okay, maybe in the new system and in year 4, I think, whatever it is here, that he's getting it put together. He was fantastic in the screen game. Now, Debo takes some of those, obviously, but do you think, first of all, do you think Diami did well enough that he priced himself out of Washington? And how into bringing him back would you be?
Yeah, I don't think he priced himself out at all. I always thought Diami was a guy that was 2 years away from being 2 years away, right? When he
Yes.
drafted out of North Carolina, he was a guy that had a lot of talent, and it really blossomed this year with Jaden. And I think if you brought him back, the role in which you would ask him to be similarly to heading into 2024 with Luke was wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Maybe get him back in a 2-year deal for $4 or $5 million. I'm absolutely fine with that. You have the cap to do that. I think he's been in the offense plenty. He's familiar with Jaden. He's familiar with Terry. He's not going to be a guy that's saying we're stealing touches from Deebo Samuel. You mentioned the screen game. If you have Deebo Samuel on your right and Diami on the left, and you want to put Terry inside in the slot and give some different looks, you can do all those type of different things. So I think Diami in the role in which he would be asked to be again in 2025 as a wide receiver 3 or 4, because they're going to ask more of Luke this year, I think it's absolutely fine. I think he deserves to be back.
And they were in that pony offense so much, at least in the first half. I mean, imagine all the combinations with Debo and the team now that you can kind of run out of that pony formation. It
Yeah.
gets me a little excited. They tell me if I'm wrong. Now you know this. We've been doing this together for a while now, and I am a big John Bates fan. To me, he's a priority bring back. If he's not the best blocking tight end in the league, he's certainly up there, above average hands, underrated hands in my mind. And you need a guy like that. And again, only got 1 tight end on the roster right now.
Yeah, agree. I would like to see Ben Sinnott also, take a step this year. They obviously had him at that H-back role, kind of in line, flexed out a little bit. If they don't bring back John Bates, Doug, I would expect that they're expecting him to take a step. However, John Bates, as you mentioned, he's not some big-time athlete at the position. He's just a road grader, lunch pail type of player that blocks his tail off and helps you in the ground game. And as you mentioned, made some really big-time catches in some high-leverage situations throughout his career coming out of Boise State. So I would like to see him back as well, really get that Ertz, Bates, Sinnott group back again, and maybe add another tight end in next year's class, even though this is a good group of tight ends this year. And I will say this, if they don't bring back John Bates, a player I think that could possibly fill his shoes close to what he does is on day 3, Jackson Hawes, tight end from Georgia Tech, is one of the premier blockers in this class. Really enjoyed his podium session to where he said, I want to get up along the offensive line and stick my face mask under someone's chin. He came in from Yale, extremely high football IQ type of player. So again, John Bates doesn't come back. Day 3, try to fill that role. Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech is someone on my mind if I'm Adam Peters.
Ellison Burley on YouTube wants to know your thoughts on Nick Nash from San Jose State.
Extremely productive, a big physical kid. I would like to have seen him at the Senior Bowl. I know he was down at Shrine. He's not going to be someone that blows anybody out of the water as far as testing, which he didn't in Indy, but he understands the nuances of the position, and separation always translates from the college to the NFL game. And when you look at Washington over the years, I don't want to bring up Cam Sims or Antonio Gandy Golden. I know people want to plug their ears when they hear those names. But Nick Nash is more of that bigger physical type of profile with outstanding hands. And he's also a bigger receiver that doesn't have to live in the contested catch area where I see a little bit too much at times with a guy at the top of the board like Tator McMillan. So I do like Nick Nash a lot.
Noah Brown was on track for like 700 yards before he goes down. I mean, how realistically can you just bring the gang back plus Debo Samuels and feel kind of comfortable with where you're at?
Yeah, it's really nice to have number 5 under center, huh,
Yes,
Doug?
it
You
is.
know, where he elevates everybody around him. You know, it's
Yep.
similar how we've talked about the Josh Allen, Lamar Jacksons of the world. Joe Burrows, of course, had Jamar and T, but just elevate everybody around you. That's really the elite trait of all these superstar quarterbacks in football. And Jaden's been able to do that. And I don't care if they sign a rando off the street and just put him in uniform, he's probably going to succeed with Jaden Daniels under center.
I got two more for you before we get out of here. To me, the running back room has got to get more juice. I like Brian Robinson Jr., not a juice guy. Eckler's still got some juice, but obviously he's getting on towards the end there. Is 29 too high in your mind to draft a running back for this particular team?
I think if there's one guy I'd prioritize at 29 if he's there is Amarian Hampton from
Yes.
North Carolina. I would not make it a Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson. I personally would not draft them at 29. But if Amarian's there, I would be fine with it. But I think there's so many guys, Doug. There's upwards of 30 to 35 guys this year in this class are going to be drafted. And there's also a lot of different body types. And I think what's interesting about this class is the Damian Martinez's, Ollie Gordon's, Cam Scattaboo of the world, Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, these more physical type of ball carriers, they're going to be bumped up boards a little bit because there's a lot of these smaller, shiftier type of ball carriers like Woody Marks from USC, Brashard Smith from SMU, who I really like, by the way, LaQuint Allen from Syracuse. Those are RJ Harvey's a smaller guy, 5'9" from UCF. I really like on a late day 2, early day 3 as well. So I'm right there with you. I think every team in football, even if you don't need one, just draft one because there's so much talent at the position this year. But bottom line is, and I agree with you, is that they need some pop at the position, both a guy that can create inside the tackles, outside the tackles, and also in space. And specifically, Brashard Smith, LaQuint Allen, 2 best guys in this class for me as far as their hands in space.
Would you trade 29 and say next year? I guess it would take next year's first or next year's second and something. Are you interested in Myles Garrett in exchange for the first round pick?
100%. 100%. I think he's
and a first next year.
I personally would. Yes. I think he's someone that's still in the prime of his career. He comes in, he's already one of the most talented players ever to wear the burgundy and gold, up there with the historics of the franchise. And he immediately fills a need both for the now, for the future. You have the money to pay him if you want. And I don't want to sit here also, Doug, and think about the Vinny Serrato days when it was Albert Hainsworth and it was all these big-time names, the Jason Taylors, the O.J. Atogways. It was like, oh, big name after big name after big name. But these guys fit what Adam Peters wants to do and also the culture. And Myles Garrett keeps talking about, I want to be there with a young quarterback that's dynamic in a Super Bowl window. Well, we got a spot for you, big dog. We got the money to pay you. So I would absolutely be interested in adding a guy like Myles Garrett for sure.
Assuming they have 29 and they don't trade out of 29, who would you take and who do you think they will take?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, I personally, as I said earlier, I would take Donovan Ezaraku at 29, the edge rusher out of Boston College. Who do I think they will take? He's up there. I think Donovan's there potentially. I'll just provide some different names. Keep an eye on Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker from UCLA. Got a lot of big-time buzz as a versatile playmaker. But I would say either of maybe a JT Tuimalau, who the pass rushing scares me a little bit, but as far as setting the edge, Jack Sawyer, same thing, his team at Ohio State, as well as Landon Jackson from Arkansas. A lot of people are up and down with Landon, but he moves in a different way with his length. I think the biggest thing right now the Commanders want is someone to set the edge and also have a developing pass rush repertoire to come in with Darryl Tapp, come in with Ryan Kerrigan, and elevate their profile as the years go on. So I think bottom line right now, I think the defensive line edge guys is someone they're going to add at 29 if they do in fact stay there.
Landon Jackson moved better than I thought he was going to. He was a lot more fluid than what I had expected,
Yeah.
so that surprised me a little bit. Okay, I lied. One more, and then we'll get you out of here.
Oh,
The
good, Doug.
fa the fan base, and we talked about this a little bit before with Brandon Comer, but the fan base is adamant that the offensive line isn't good enough. Do you think Peters feels that way? Or again, does the scheme in JD5 make you right so that you can put your focus on the defense? Because I'm with you. To me, it's crucial that they fix that defense for next year.
Yeah, the offense isn't the problem. It isn't. And I
Yeah.
think even adding Debo Samuel is only going to help the offensive line. And the reason why I say that is because Jaden's going to get the ball out of his hands even quicker with a guy like Debo on the outside. So that will help the front five. However, I'm never against competition. Never. Don't care who you have, where you have it, what they've done in the past. Always adding guys that can come in and compete for you. But I think right now I would keep Brandon at left tackle. I like the left side with Allegretti and Biotish. We'll see what happens with Cosme down the road. Is it just a plug of a free agent that you bring in for 1 year? We'll see. Is Wiley your right tackle? I just don't think the offensive line right now for me is one of my top 3 team needs for the Commanders right now. So that's where kind of I'm at with everything. I think the offensive line is fine. Offense isn't the issue. They got to stop some people. Bottom line, that starts on defense.
Who plays right guard? I mean, you're looking at least the first half of the season for Cosme, right? At least with that injury.
Yeah.
How do
I think it'd be
bring
really
Brandon
nice.
Sheriff in for a year?
Yeah, I was thinking Brandon. I would be absolutely fine with that. I know some people are probably saying Alex Kappa. I'm all the way out on Kappa. He
Me
was
too.
abysmal this past year and went Cincinnati, so I'm out on that situation. I think they could find a guy maybe on day 3 to potentially fill that hole. I mentioned some names earlier. Maybe it's even a smaller school guy like a Clay Webb from Jacksonville State or Jackson Slater who really fits that body type for Cliff Kingsbury from Sacramento State. So those types of guys, I think maybe on day 3. But I really think that the defensive line is the prioritization here if they are unable to trade their 29 and potentially the one next year for a guy like Myles Garrett.
Ryan, thank you, buddy. You're the best man. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks, Doug. Always talking, man. Appreciate you.